I'm Piper Perry, 30 years old, and I've spent years in my sister's shadow. Last Sunday at our family dinner in Milwaukee, she leaned back in her chair smirking and said, "Not everyone can handle a real career in tech." The table buzzed with her usual praise, Mom nodding, Dad chuckling, her husband shifting uncomfortably. I gripped my fork, biting back a response. Then Grandpa, sharp as ever at 78, turned to me, his eyes glinting. "So, Piper, you bought her company out of pity." The room froze. My sister's smirk vanished. Mom's wine glass clinked hard against the table. Nobody breathed. I locked eyes with Grandpa, my heart pounding, knowing the truth was about to unravel everything. If you've ever faced family drama that hits like a gut punch, smash that subscribe button and drop your story in the comments. Let's talk about it. Growing up in Milwaukee, I was always the quiet one, the kid who'd rather organize my thoughts than steal the spotlight. My sister Genesis was the opposite. By 13, she was coding financial apps on our clunky family computer, piecing together algorithms that predicted stock trends. Mom and Dad called her a prodigy, their eyes lighting up whenever she explained her latest project. Neighbors whispered about her being the next big thing in tech. I'd sit at the kitchen table sketching ideas for user-friendly apps, but Genesis would glance at my notes and scoff. "That's not realistic, Piper. Stick to something simpler." I wasn't jealous, not exactly. I loved breaking down data, finding patterns in numbers, and figuring out what made people tick. At 10, I'd spend hours analyzing our family's grocery budget, suggesting ways to save a few bucks. Mom would pat my head, say, "That's cute, Piper," and go right back to praising Genesis for her genius. Dad once handed me a calculator and said, "Keep practicing, kid. Maybe you'll catch up." It stung, but I swallowed it, telling myself I'd prove them wrong someday. School didn't help. Genesis skipped a grade, breezing through math and computer science like it was nothing. Teachers fawned over her, pinning her projects on the bulletin board. I was good too. Top of my class in business studies, always the one kids came to for help with presentations. But when I pitched an idea for a budgeting app in 8th grade, Genesis laughed it off at dinner. "Piper, nobody needs an app to tell them how to spend their money," she said, her voice dripping with that older sister's superiority. Mom nodded along, not even looking at me. Dad just shrugged, like my idea was a passing whim. Grandpa was different. He'd sit on the porch sipping his coffee, listening to me ramble about customer behavior and data trends. At 70, he'd retired from running a small accounting firm, but his mind was razor sharp. "You've got a knack for seeing what people need. Piper," he'd say, his voice steady, "don't let anyone tell you it's not enough." Those moments kept me going, but they were rare. Most of the time, I was invisible, trailing behind Genesis's glow. By high school, Genesis was entering coding competitions, racking up awards. She'd come home with trophies, and Mom would clear space on the mantel before she even walked through the door. I focused on what I was good at: analyzing markets, crafting pitches. I won a state debate contest at 16, but when I showed Mom the certificate, she said, "That's nice, Piper. Did you see Genesis's new app got featured in a tech blog?" I forced a smile, my chest tightening. Dad didn't even look up from his newspaper. It wasn't just family. Friends, teachers, even Uncle David, they all saw Genesis as the star. At family gatherings, people asked her about her latest coding project while I got questions like, "So, Piper, you still helping out with school stuff?" I'd nod, hiding how much it hurt. I wasn't just helping out. I was building skills, learning how to connect data to people's needs. But nobody saw it. Not Mom, not Dad, not even my sister's husband, who barely spoke to me back then. The worst part was how Genesis leaned into it. She'd correct my ideas in front of everyone, saying things like, "Piper Tech isn't about feelings, it's about results." I'd bite my tongue, not wanting to start a fight. But every time she dismissed me, it chipped away at my confidence. I started doubting myself, wondering if I really was just the support player in her story. Still, I kept at it, pouring my energy into understanding how businesses worked, how people made decisions. I wasn't coding like Genesis, but I was damn good at seeing the bigger picture. By the time I was 18, I'd had enough of being second best. I decided to carve my own path away from Genesis's shadow. I applied to the University of Wisconsin-Madison for business, not because it was flashy, but because it was practical. Genesis, of course, got into MIT, and Mom and Dad threw a party like she'd won the lottery. I packed my bags in silence, promising myself I'd make them see me not as Genesis's little sister, but as Piper, someone who mattered. Looking back, those years shaped me. The constant comparisons, the brushed-off ideas, the feeling of being less than it all pushed me to work harder, to prove I was more than what they thought. I didn't know it then, but that drive would lead me to a moment where I'd turn the tables not just on Genesis, but on everyone who underestimated me. I wasn't chasing glory like my sister. I wanted to understand how companies worked, how data could solve real problems for real people. My classes on market analysis and consumer behavior felt like a puzzle I was born to solve. I graduated top of my class in 2015, landing a job at Horizon Tech, a fintech company in Chicago. Starting as a product manager, I worked on apps that helped people manage their money, simple, practical tools, the kind I'd sketched as a kid. By 25, I was leading a team streamlining user interfaces to make our apps intuitive. My boss called my work game-changing, but at family dinners back in Milwaukee, nobody cared. My sister, meanwhile, went to MIT. Of course she did. She studied computer science, dazzling her professors with AI models that predicted market trends. By 2018, she launched NovaCore, her own startup focused on AI-driven financial forecasting. Tech blogs raved about her visionary algorithms. At Sunday dinners, she'd dominate the conversation, tossing around terms like machine learning and disruptive innovation. Mom would beam, saying she's changing the world. Dad would nod, asking her to explain her latest pitch to investors. I'd sit there picking at my plate, waiting for someone to ask about my work. They never did. Instead, Mom would turn to me and say, "Piper, you still doing office stuff at that company?" Office stuff. Like I was filing papers or answering phones. I'd correct her, explaining how I'd redesigned our app's onboarding process, boosting user retention by 20%. She'd smile vaguely, then ask Genesis about her next big project. Dad once said, "Piper, you're doing great, but tech's about innovation, like what your sister's doing." I swallowed the sting, forcing a nod. Genesis would smirk, not even trying to hide it, and say, "It's okay, Piper. Not everyone's cut out for the big leagues." Those dinners were a ritual. Every few months, we'd gather at Mom and Dad's house in Milwaukee. Grandpa would be there, sipping his coffee, watching everything with those sharp eyes of his. Uncle David would show up, cracking jokes, but even he'd steer the conversation to Genesis's latest award or funding round. My sister's husband, quiet as ever, would just nod along, avoiding my gaze. I'd try to chime in, mentioning a new feature I'd launched or a client meeting I'd nailed. But Mom would cut me off, saying, "That's nice, Piper," before asking Genesis about her investors. It was like my work didn't exist. By 2020, I was climbing the ranks at Horizon Tech. I became a senior product manager, overseeing a team of 10. We launched an app update that cut customer complaints by half, earning me a promotion to Director of Product Strategy by 2024. I was 29, managing multi-million-dollar projects, negotiating with clients, and shaping the company's roadmap. I loved the challenge, the way every decision I made could shift how thousands of people managed their finances. But back home, I was still Piper, the office worker. At one dinner, I mentioned a deal I'd closed with a major bank. Genesis cut in, laughing. "That's cute, Piper. I just signed a contract with a venture capital firm for $10 million. Mom clapped her hands, gushing about NovaCore's bright future. Dad raised his glass to Genesis. I stared at my plate, my face burning. Grandpa, though, noticed. He'd catch my eye across the table, giving me a small nod like he saw what nobody else did. One night after dinner, he pulled me aside on the porch. "Piper," he said, his voice low, "you're building something real. Don't let their noise drown you out." I clung to those words, but they couldn't erase the frustration. Every time I tried to share my wins, Genesis would top me with some flashy story about her startup. Her husband would stay silent, picking at his food, like he knew something but wouldn't say it. Uncle David would change the subject, asking Genesis about her latest tech conference. By 2025, I was 30, a director at Horizon Tech, leading a team that turned data into solutions that mattered. I'd stopped expecting mom or dad to notice. Genesis's star kept rising, at least that's what she wanted everyone to think. Her social media was full of posts about Novacore's groundbreaking tech, her speeches at industry events, her face on magazine covers. But I started hearing whispers in the industry. Novacore was burning through cash, losing clients faster than it gained them. Genesis never mentioned that at dinner. She kept up the act, boasting about her empire while I sat there knowing something she didn't. My role at Horizon Tech gave me access to reports that would soon change everything. In January 2025, I was in my Chicago office at Horizon Tech, staring at a report that hit like a punch to the gut. As Director of Product Strategy, I had access to industry analyses, and there it was. Novacore, my sister's company, flagged as a failing startup. Genesis had built Novacore into a darling of the fintech world with AI that promised to revolutionize financial forecasting. But the numbers told a different story. They were burning through cash, spending 5 times their revenue on oversized teams and splashy ad campaigns. Clients were bailing, fed up with glitchy software and steep costs. The report marked Novacore as a prime acquisition target, teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. I sat there, my heart racing, realizing Genesis's empire was about to collapse. Part of me wanted to feel smug. For years, Genesis had belittled my work, tossing out lines like "not everyone's cut out for the big leagues." But seeing her company's name on that list didn't bring joy, it brought a knot of anxiety. If Novacore went under, mom and dad would be crushed. They'd staked their pride on her success. Even Grandpa, who always saw through her swagger, would hate the fallout for our family. I thought about texting Genesis, giving her a heads up, but I could already hear her dismissing me, maybe even accusing me of sticking my nose where it didn't belong. She'd never taken my advice before. At Horizon Tech, my team was assigned to evaluate acquisition targets, and Novacore was at the top of the list. Its AI tech was valuable, but its operations were a disaster. We could acquire it, cut the fat, and integrate its algorithms into our platform, saving it from ruin while boosting our own growth. The problem: I'd be leading the evaluation. That meant dissecting my sister's financials, her mistakes, her overconfidence. It felt like a betrayal, like I was turning her failures into my opportunity. I wrestled with the conflict of interest for days, staring at my computer screen, weighing the consequences. If I stepped away, another team would take over, and they might gut Novacore without a second thought, leaving Genesis with nothing. I needed perspective, so I called Grandpa one night. "Piper?" He said, his voice calm but firm. "You've got a gift for fixing what's broken. Do what's right, even if it's hard." He didn't know the specifics, but his words cut through my doubt. I couldn't let emotions derail me. If Novacore failed, it wouldn't just hurt Genesis, it would hurt everyone who believed in her, including mom and dad. So I decided to join the evaluation team, but I kept it under wraps. No need to alert Genesis or the family until the deal was locked in. I told myself I was doing this to save her company, even if she'd never thank me. The evaluation was grueling. My team and I spent weeks tearing through Novacore's records. The deeper we went, the uglier it got. Genesis had splurged on a fancy downtown office, hired too many coders, and ignored user complaints. Her AI was brilliant, predicting market shifts with pinpoint accuracy, but the platform was a nightmare to use. A major client, a Midwest credit union, had ditched Novacore after a software crash wiped out their data. My team saw it as a deal-breaker, but I saw a fixable flaw. With my expertise in user experience, we could revamp the interface and make the AI accessible. I drafted a $15 million acquisition proposal outlining how Horizon Tech could absorb Novacor, keep its team, and turn it into a success. I didn't breathe a word to anyone at home. Not Mom, not Dad, not Grandpa. They'd think I was trying to overshadow Genesis stealing her thunder. My sister's husband might have caught wind of something. He worked in finance and had his ear to the ground, but he stayed quiet. Uncle David was too busy planning his next fishing trip to notice. I worked late nights polishing the proposal, second-guessing myself every step of the way. Genesis's voice echoed in my head. "Piper, you're not cut out for this." But this wasn't about her anymore. It was about doing my job, proving I could handle the big leagues, and maybe saving her from her own mistakes. By February 2025, the proposal was done. My boss called it a stroke of genius, and the board greenlit it. We set a meeting with Novacor's leadership, including Genesis, for early March. I hadn't talked to her in months, not since she'd brushed off my work at the last family dinner. I could already imagine her face when she saw my name on the acquisition papers. Would she explode? Or worse, would she laugh it off? One thing was certain: the next family dinner, just weeks away, was going to be a reckoning. It was a Sunday in March, and I sat at Mom and Dad's dining table in Milwaukee, the familiar hum of family chatter filling the air. The smell of roasted chicken and mashed potatoes didn't calm the knot in my stomach. I'd been dreading this dinner since I finalized the Novacor acquisition proposal last month. Across from me, Genesis leaned back in her chair, her voice cutting through the noise. "Not everyone can handle a real career in tech," she said, her smirk aimed right at me. Mom nodded, her eyes sparkling with pride. Dad chuckled, passing her the gravy. My sister's husband, Justin, shifted in his seat, avoiding my gaze. Uncle David laughed, oblivious, piling food on his plate. I gripped my fork, my knuckles whitening, but I stayed quiet. I'd learned long ago to let Genesis have her moment. Then Grandpa spoke. His voice, steady and sharp at 78, sliced through the room. "So, Piper, you bought her company out of pity." The words landed like a grenade. The table went silent. Genesis's smirk froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Mom's wineglass clinked hard against her plate. Dad's eyebrows shot up, his mouth open. Justin's eyes flicked to me, wide with shock. Uncle David stopped chewing, his fork dangling. I locked eyes with Grandpa, his glint telling me he knew exactly what he was doing. My heart pounded, the truth I'd kept hidden for weeks clawing its way out. I took a deep breath, my voice steady despite the chaos in my chest. "I didn't buy it out of pity, Grandpa," I said, turning to Genesis. "I led the team at Horizon Tech that evaluated Novacor. Your company was drowning, spending 5 times its revenue, losing clients left and right. We proposed a $15 million buyout to save it from bankruptcy." The room stayed frozen, every eye on me. Genesis's face drained of color, her mouth twitching like she couldn't process the words. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Dad leaned forward, his voice low. "Piper, what are you talking about?" Justin stared at his plate, his jaw tight like he'd seen this coming. Genesis found her voice sharp and brittle. "You're lying, Piper. You're just jealous, trying to make me look bad." Her words stung, but I didn't flinch. "I'm not lying," I said, my tone firm. "I saw the reports. Your AI is brilliant, but your business model was a mess. Clients were leaving because of buggy software and bad user experience. I built the plan to fix it, to keep your team employed, to save what you built." I paused, letting it sink in. Horizon Tech's board approved it. The meeting's next week. "You'll see my name on the documents." Mom's voice trembled. "Piper, why didn't you tell us?" Dad shook his head, muttering, "This can't be right." Genesis slammed her fork down, her eyes blazing. "You went behind my back. You think you're better than me." Her voice cracked, betraying the panic beneath her anger. Justin finally spoke, his voice quiet but clear. "She's not lying, Genesis. I saw Piper's name in the industry reports last month." The room felt like it was shrinking, the air thick with tension. Grandpa leaned back, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Sounds like Piper's the one handling the real career in tech, he said, his words cutting deeper than Genesis's ever could. Uncle David coughed, trying to break the silence, but it didn't work. Mom stared at me, her eyes wide with confusion, like she was seeing me for the first time. Dad rubbed his forehead, muttering something about family business. Genesis pushed her chair back, her face a mix of fury and humiliation. You had no right, she hissed, her voice shaking. This is my company. I met her gaze, unflinching. I had every right, I said. I did my job. And I did it to save your company, not to take it from you. The silence that followed was deafening, heavier than any I'd ever felt. For years, I'd sat at this table invisible while Genesis basked in the spotlight. Now every eye was on me, and the weight of it was both terrifying and exhilarating. I'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, knowing it would come out, but nothing could have prepared me for the raw shock on their faces. The truth was out, and there was no going back. I pushed through the front door of Mom and Dad's house in Milwaukee, the cool March air hitting my face as I chased after Genesis. She stood on the porch, her arms crossed, staring into the dark. Her breath was uneven, her shoulders tense from the bombshell I'd dropped at dinner. I'd just revealed that I led Horizon Tech's plan to buy Novacore, her failing company, and she'd stormed out, her anger shaking the room. Genesis. I called, my voice firm but not harsh. She didn't turn, but I saw her hands clench tighter. We need to talk. You can't just walk away from this. She spun around, her eyes blazing. Talk. You think I want to hear more of your lies, Piper? Her voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet night. You've always been jealous, waiting for your chance to humiliate me. You think you're better than me now? The accusation stung, dragging up years of her dismissing me as the lesser sister. I took a step closer, keeping my voice steady. I'm not lying, Genesis. Novacore was collapsing, clients gone, money burned. I spent weeks building a $15 million plan to save it, to keep your AI, your team. This isn't about beating you. It's about saving what you built. Genesis scoffed, her laugh bitter and cold. Saving it? You expect me to believe you're doing me a favor? You went behind my back, Piper. You want to take my company and make it yours. Her words were a knife, twisting with every syllable. I shook my head, frustration rising. I didn't go behind your back. I did my job. If I hadn't stepped in, Novacore would be bankrupt by now. Your AI is brilliant, but your platform's a disaster. I fixed what you ignored. For a moment, her eyes flickered with uncertainty, but she quickly masked it with defiance. The door creaked open and Mom stepped onto the porch, her face pale. Piper, this isn't right, she said, her voice trembling. You should have told Genesis first, not ambushed her like this. Dad followed, his jaw tight. You're causing a mess, Piper. Why didn't you talk to us? Their words felt like a betrayal, as if I'd done something wrong by saving my sister's company. I didn't ambush anyone, I said, my voice rising. You've never listened to me before, Mom. You always saw Genesis as the star. If I'd told you, you'd have said I was meddling, just like always. Justin appeared behind Dad, his expression conflicted. Genesis, he said, his voice low. Piper's telling the truth. I saw the reports last month. Novacore was in deep trouble. Her plan, it's a good one. It keeps your team employed. Genesis turned on him, her voice sharp. You knew and didn't tell me. Whose side are you on? Justin. He flinched but held his ground. I'm on your side, but you need to hear her out. Piper's trying to help. Genesis shook her head, muttering, You're all against me, her voice cracking with hurt. Grandpa's cane tapped as he stepped onto the porch, his presence commanding despite his age. That's enough, he said, his voice calm but firm. Piper didn't do this to hurt you, Genesis. She saw a problem and fixed it like she's always done. He looked at me, his eyes warm with pride. You've got a good head, Piper. Don't let anyone make you doubt it. Then he turned to Genesis, softer now. You're brilliant, Genesis, but pride's blinding you. Piper's not your enemy. She's your sister. Genesis's shoulders sagged, but she stayed silent, her gaze fixed on the ground. I took a deep breath, stepping closer to her. Genesis. I kept this quiet because I knew you'd think I was trying to one-up you. I spent nights poring over your company's books making sure your AI survived your team stayed. I did it because I believe in you, even if you don't believe in me. Her hands unclenched slightly, but she didn't look up. Mom's voice broke the silence softer now. Piper, we didn't know you were doing all this. Dad rubbed his neck, muttering, "This is a lot to take in." Uncle David poked his head out, his voice hesitant. "Piper, you're saying you saved Novacor?" I nodded, exhausted, but resolute. "Yes, David. I did what I had to." Grandpa's hand rested on my shoulder, steadying me. "You did good," he said quietly. Genesis finally looked up, her eyes wet but still defiant. "I don't need your help," she whispered, her voice shaky. "I built Novacor. I'll fix it myself." She turned and walked down the steps, disappearing into the night. Justin sighed, following her, his voice fading as he called her name. Mom and Dad stood frozen, their faces a mix of confusion and guilt. I felt the weight of their doubt, but Grandpa's nod kept me grounded. This fight wasn't over, but I'd said my piece. Days after that explosive dinner, I sat in Mom and Dad's living room, the tension from Genesis's departure still lingering like a bruise. The air felt heavy, the kind of quiet that follows a fight no one knows how to fix. I'd stayed behind after Genesis stormed out, her words, "I don't need your help," echoing in my head. Mom sat on the couch, twisting her hands, her eyes avoiding mine. Dad leaned against the doorway. His arms crossed, his silence louder than any lecture. Uncle David was there too, sipping coffee, looking uncomfortable. Grandpa sat in his armchair, his steady gaze giving me the strength to speak. I didn't want it to come to this. I started, my voice low but firm. I led Horizon Tech's team to save Novacor because it was the right thing to do. Genesis's company was failing, clients were leaving, cash was gone. My $15 million proposal keeps her AI alive, her team employed. I did it for her, not to take anything away. Mom's eyes flicked up, her expression softening but uncertain. "Piper, we didn't know," she said quietly. "You've always been so quiet about your work. We thought—" Her voice trailed off, but I knew what she meant. They thought I was just the office worker, not the one calling the shots. Dad cleared his throat, his voice gruff. "You should have told us, Piper. Going behind Genesis's back, it doesn't sit right." I shook my head, frustration bubbling up. "I didn't go behind her back, Dad. I did my job. If I'd told you before, you'd have said I was interfering like always." Dad's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Uncle David set his coffee down, his voice hesitant. "Piper, you're saying you saved her company? That's big." I nodded, meeting his eyes. "Yes, David. I spent weeks making sure Novacor didn't crash and burn." Grandpa's cane tapped the floor, drawing everyone's attention. "Piper's been carrying this family's weight for years," he said, his voice calm but sharp. "You've all been so busy praising Genesis you didn't see what Piper's built. She's not just saving Novacor, she's proving who she is." His words hit hard, and for the first time I saw Mom's eyes well up with guilt. Dad looked away, rubbing his neck, his silence admitting more than words could. The front door opened, and Justin stepped in, his face tired but determined. "I talked to Genesis," he said, looking at me. "She's still upset, but she's looking at the proposal. She knows Novacor was in trouble, she just didn't want to admit it." My heart lifted slightly, but I stayed cautious. "What did she say?" I asked. Justin sighed, sitting down. "She's hurt, Piper. She thinks you're trying to take control. But I showed her the numbers you sent me. She's starting to see the plan might work." I nodded, relief mixing with exhaustion. Genesis wasn't ready to forgive, but she was listening. Mom's voice broke the silence, softer now. "Piper, I'm sorry. We didn't realize how much you were doing at Horizon Tech. We should have asked more. It was the first time I'd heard her apologize, and it felt like a crack in the wall between us. Dad shifted his voice low. "We've been unfair to you, Piper. I see that now." His admission was quiet, but it carried weight. Uncle David nodded, adding, "You've done something incredible, Piper. I had no idea." Their words were a balm soothing years of being overlooked, but they didn't erase the ache of Genesis's anger. Grandpa leaned forward, his eyes locked on mine. "You've done right by this family, Piper," he said. "Genesis will come around. She's stubborn, but she's not blind. Keep doing what you do." His confidence steadied me, but I couldn't shake the weight of my sister's distrust. I'd spent years in her shadow proving myself to a family that barely noticed. Now they were starting to see me, but the cost was a rift with Genesis I wasn't sure I could mend. I thought about calling Genesis, but I held back. She needed time, and I needed to focus. The acquisition meeting was days away, and I had to prepare. I'd poured everything into this plan not just to save Novacor, but to show I was more than the other sister. As I sat there surrounded by my family's tentative support, I felt a shift. They were beginning to understand, and maybe Genesis would too. I wasn't giving up. Not on her, not on us. A week after our family's tense confrontation, I sat across from Genesis in a quiet Milwaukee coffee shop, the hum of conversation around us doing little to ease the knot in my chest, and Justin had convinced Genesis to meet me, saying she was ready to talk. She sat stiffly, her coffee untouched, her eyes fixed on the table. I took a deep breath, breaking the silence. "Genesis, I never wanted to hurt you. I led Horizon Tech's plan to save Novacor because I believed in your work. I still do." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't interrupt, so I pressed on. "Your AI is groundbreaking, but the business was falling apart. My $15 million proposal keeps it alive. Your team, your vision." She finally looked up, her eyes softer but guarded. "I saw the proposal, Piper," she said, her voice low. "Justin showed me the numbers. You saved Novacor." Her admission was quiet, almost reluctant, but it carried weight. "I thought you were trying to take it from me." I was wrong. The words hit me hard, a crack in the wall between us. I knotted my throat tight. "I've spent years feeling like I was in your shadow, Genesis. Every family dinner, it was always about you. I just wanted to show I could do something that mattered." Genesis's expression softened, a flicker of guilt crossing her face. "I didn't know you felt that way," she said. "I was so caught up in Novacor, I didn't see how I was pushing you away." "I'm sorry, Piper." Her apology was raw, tinged with the pride she couldn't fully let go. I swallowed hard, the years of being overlooked bubbling up. "I'm sorry too," I said. "I should have talked to you sooner, but I was scared you'd think I was trying to outshine you." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our words settling between us. She reached across the table, her hand hesitating before touching mine. "You didn't just save my company," she said. "You showed me I need to listen more. I want us to work together on this, Piper. Your plan, it's good. Really good." Her offer caught me off guard, a spark of hope I hadn't expected. I smiled, nodding. "I'd like that. Let's make Novacor what it was meant to be." For the first time in years, I saw my sister not the rival, but the partner she could be. A few days later, Mom and Dad hosted a small family dinner at their house, a quiet attempt to mend what had broken. The dining room felt warmer than it had in weeks, the table set with Mom's lasagna and Dad's favorite wine. Grandpa sat at the head, his eyes twinkling with pride. Justin was there, his arm around Genesis, who looked more at ease than I'd seen her in months. Uncle David passed the bread, joking about needing a tech translator to keep up with us. The air was lighter, but I could still feel the echoes of our fight. Mom raised her glass, her voice steady but emotional. "Piper, Genesis, we've been wrong to compare you two. You're both incredible, and we're so proud." Dad nodded, his eyes meeting mine. "Piper, I didn't see how much you've done. I'm sorry for that. You've earned your place." His words were simple, but they healed something deep inside me. Grandpa chuckled, lifting his glass. To Piper and Genesis, two brilliant women who remind us what family's about. We clinked glasses, and I caught Genesis's eye, her smile small but genuine. Justin spoke up, his voice calm. The acquisition's moving forward. Genesis and Piper are working together to integrate NovaCore's tech with Horizon's platform. It's going to be big. Uncle David grinned, shaking his head. You two are unstoppable, he said. Genesis laughed a real laugh and squeezed my hand under the table. We are, she said, her voice warm. I felt a weight lift, years of tension dissolving in that moment. As the evening wound down, I stepped onto the porch, the cool night air clearing my thoughts. I thought about the journey, being the overlooked sister fighting to prove myself, saving NovaCore not just for Genesis, but for me. I'd spent so long chasing approval, but now I saw it. I didn't need it. I'd built something real, and my family finally saw me for it. Genesis joined me, her presence quiet but steady. We're good, right? She asked, her voice soft. I nodded, smiling. Yeah, we're good. Looking back, I realized this wasn't just about saving a company. It was about understanding myself, my sister, our family. We'd been pitted against each other, but we were stronger together. As I stood there, the stars bright above Milwaukee, I felt whole. Not because I'd won, but because we'd found a way to rebuild what mattered most.